The Sarasota County Bar Association is a proud partner in bringing you Law and Sarasota. With voluntary membership of over 900 lawyers and judges, the Sarasota County Bar Association is your community's leader in advancing legal professionalism, practice development, and public service. Visit www.sarasotabar.com for more information and to use the online directory list to find an attorney.
This program is brought to you by a grant from the Community Foundation of Sarasota County and the Sarasota County Bar Association. The Education Channel produces the program and broadcasts from its state-of-the-art campus on Beneva Road. They make this program possible. Hello, this is Senior Judge Lee Haworth. Welcome to Law in Sarasota. The goal of this program is to inform the public about the legal profession, the many positive things that lawyers do, and giving our viewers the background of the elected and appointed officers who play a critical role in the lives of our fellow citizens as they administer justice. In 2018, our community welcomed 2 women lawyers as new judges. One, Maria Rule, was elected as a circuit judge. She was interviewed on this program recently. You can find out all about her on Sarasota County Schools' Video on Demand channel. Today as a guest, we have our newest Sarasota County Judge, Dana Moss. She was appointed by Governor Scott to replace retired Judge Judy Goldman. She started on the bench in January of 2019. I think our audience will find her life story intriguing, and judges, like all of us, are formed by our experiences, our family, the community where we were raised, and a succession of life-changing experiences that make us the persons we are today. So, let's learn about Judge Moss. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to start pretty much back at the beginning because you have an interesting history. Tell me where you were raised.
I was raised in a small town called Martinsburg, Pennsylvania. It's in the southwestern part of Pennsylvania. To this day, the population still remains under 2,000 people.
So you went to elementary school there?
I did.
Tell me about your school.
It was a older building, probably built in the early 1800s, and to this day, well, it's since been torn down, but that's where we had the elementary school, kindergarten up through the 6th grade, and that's where I attended the elementary school.
So was this a Mennonite area?
It is. It's a farming community, mostly dairy farming, but with some crops as well. A large Amish and Mennonite community, and to this day, when I go home to visit family, I still see the horse and buggies going up and down the road.
Oh, goodness. So tell me about your parents. What line of work were they in?
My mother was a nurse. She earned her LPN degree. And my father was in auto mechanics, and he had a small little used car sales shop, and he did some auto body work and repairs as well.
So is that a farming community?
It is. In Martinsburg, it is farming. And like I said, population under 2,000. There's 9 churches in the community and 1 signal light in the middle of town.
And you had some interesting childhood jobs, didn't you?
I did. At an early age, it was impressed upon me. It is important to work, and certainly if I wanted to have spending money, I needed to learn the value of the dollar and earn that on my own. So starting when I was 12 years old, I had a newspaper route in the community. I delivered all the papers up and down the main road in town, so I got to know the members of the community pretty well. And once I was old enough to drive, I actually went to a neighboring town and did some waitress work. I also worked in a nursing home that was in the community, and worked in the dietary department in the nursing home. And in the summer times, we didn't have much of a summer in Pennsylvania, about 3 months, but I worked in the community pool as a lifeguard.
Did you have any opportunity to get involved in the fields there with the vegetables?
I did. That was another way that we made money, that working in the farming industry, and I'm glad I did it. It's hard work. It also taught me that I knew I did not want to be a farmer, and I was going to go on and get my education. Pick potatoes and melons, strawberries, in the fall, apple orchards.
Get paid by the basket, is that how they did that?
That is how they did it.
My goodness. So how about your schooling? Where'd you go to school after elementary?
After elementary school, I stayed we only had the 1 high school in the town, so I completed my education the whole way through in there. Every small area, everyone knew everyone. And once I was in my senior year, coming up in my senior year in high school, and guidance counselor called me down to the office and said, we want to offer you a scholarship to attend Penn State. And
Goodness gracious. So you must have been doing pretty well academically in high school.
it was an academic scholarship, and a lot of subjects came easy to me. Math came easy to me. But I love school, so it was never something that I always wanted to be there, and so it came pretty easy.
Well, a lot of folks, you know, that's kind of a rare circumstance nowadays, but there were certain things unique about small towns, particularly in those days. You told me once about party lines. What were those?
And I grew up throughout the 1980s. We still had party lines, so that if you
We've got to explain that because a lot of kids who are watching this are not going to know what that is.
well, when they may not even recognize the old phones that you had a receiver, the phone was on the wall, we had to be plugged in. There was no cordless like what we're used to today, certainly no cell phones that we knew of. But when you would pick up the phone and you would call someone, sometimes you would hear some clicking noises and you'd realize somebody else was on the phone with you, and it was because it was a communal line that could be used for more than one conversation in the community.
So when a neighbor's using it, you had to wait for them to finish
Yes.
before you could start dialing or calling yourself.
Absolutely. If I picked up the phone, sometimes I could hear the little old lady down the street in a conversation, so I'd hang up, but I'd every so often get on to see if she's done yet, and sometimes you'd click the little button a few times so they'd realize you're waiting your turn in line, so they would get off.
Like get off, it's my turn, yeah.
Yes.
Well, we've come a long way since then, for sure. So let's talk about Penn State now. What was your interest in college?
I majored in political science, and I was so fortunate that while I was at the Penn State, there were some meetings one day on campus about studying abroad. I said, wow, I've never really been outside of Pennsylvania and the small farming community, and I had scholarship money that was made available to me. I asked if I'd be allowed to use that money to study abroad, and I was told yes, so I signed up. I spent a semester in Athens, Greece, and also had the opportunity to go to San German, Puerto Rico to study Spanish.
Okay, so looking back at your college career, were there any particular professors that were influential as you look back in helping you develop your career ideas or your skills that you use as a lawyer or now as a judge?
The teacher who stands out most to me, he was a professor at the Penn State Altoona campus and also taught in my high school, a man named Mr. DeStefano. And he was really inspirational in giving me constructive, critical feedback on my writing. And I remember writing an article one time and he was giving me a review on it. And my first inclination was to have my feelings hurt because I thought it was pretty good. But I realized he was trying to help me to become a better writer. And communication is so important in so many of the careers that we engage in. It's important to be an effective writer and be mindful of your audience. So he planted that seed in my mind, and ever since then I wanted to work and strive to be a better writer and be able to communicate more effectively.
Well, we'll get to a point in your career where you did a lot of legal writing, but we'll hold that for right now. Talk about the scholarship you got. Did it cover everything, or did you have to supplement that?
I had to supplement. The scholarships that came forward, they were generous, and I remember a time I actually was able to meet the widow of someone who had set up a scholarship fund in the name of her husband. And it was just so inspirational to meet this woman who, she didn't know me, but she made provisions that I could attend Penn State. And I don't know that I could have done it without her. I knew I always wanted to go to college, and of course it was important to my parents, but we were blue-collar, working-class family. I wasn't sure how it was going to happen. So I remember just being so thankful for this woman making sure that I had the funds, and it was always important to me to want to give back one day.
A lot of us in college did jobs like I was a waiter. Did you ever get any waitressing in as a college student?
I did. I did have to work my way through because certainly I still needed gas money and needed to live and had to pay for some books and incidentals. So I did work. I made it a point to make my schedule conducive that I could work. There were some semesters I loaded up with 21 credits on a Tuesday, Thursday, so I'd start at 8:30 in the morning and finish at 9 at night, go all day long, but then I'd have the other days through the week free for working and studying.
Well, we may have some students who are looking at college and looking at scholarships. Did you have to maintain a certain grade point in order to maintain scholarships?
I did. My grades always stayed up, above the 3.0 mark. But there are scholarships for so many different levels based on so many different backgrounds. I would encourage students to go meet with their guidance counselors and speak to people who have experience. You would be surprised what's out there. I think in general we have a very generous community that we want to see our youth get to school, get them that education. And I want to say where there's a will, there's a way.
Any particular honors that you can recall while you were in college?
I was named to the dean's list every semester, and I had renewing scholarships each time, and that continued through into law school.
Okay, well now we're going to talk a little bit about your career after college. When you were graduated, that was what year?
I graduated in 1993.
Okay, and your first job?
I had one job where I went to work for a correctional institution. It was a private institution, and I believe that was in 1995 that I started that, the first real professional job. And that was my introduction into the criminal justice system.
And you apparently had some law enforcement experience. How did that
I
come
did.
about?
I moved to North Carolina with the goal of attending North Carolina Chapel Hill Law School. And again, I came from a working class family, and I thought it would be best that I establish residency in the state of North Carolina in hopes of paying the in-state tuition. So once I moved to North Carolina, I picked up the local newspaper to look for a job, and I saw that they were hiring for law enforcement for the City of Raleigh Police Department, Raleigh, North Carolina.
So you went to the academy?
I went through the academy.
And you get out of there, and what, you go on patrol?
I went on patrol in the city and
had to arrest people and all
had
that?
to arrest
Yeah.
had to arrest people. Yes.
And so how long did you do that?
I did that for just shy of 6 years, and then I applied to go to law school.
Did you meet anybody of interest when you were at the academy or in law enforcement? Tell us that story.
I did. When I went through the police academy, it was a funny story. They talked to us about officer safety. That was very important. And they warned us about be careful about clotheslines in the middle of the night. They can be pretty dangerous.
Running through a yard.
Running through.
People have clotheslines in North Carolina. I don't think I've seen one in Florida in years, but I guess they still have them.
Yes. And I thought, well, that's funny. A clothesline, how could that be dangerous? But they said, oh, there was an officer one time who really suffered a serious injury, almost died as a result of running into a clothesline. And I thought it was a little funny, but anyway, months later, after I was done with the training in the academy and I was out on patrol, we had a new sergeant come into the platoon where I was assigned, and I met him, a man named Ray Moss, and we got to know each other. And one day I asked him what the scar on his head was from, and he said, well, interesting story. Years ago when I was a young cop, I ran into a clothesline, fell and hit my head and had a brain bleed. So I said, they tell about you in the academy.
So you developed a relationship with him. You all wound up getting married?
We did. We got married, and we have 2 daughters at home.
Okay. So tell me about where you went after you were a police officer in Raleigh.
We actually, my husband got a job as chief of police out west in Colorado, so we moved out to Colorado. And as we knew he was getting close to retirement and he'd be winding down his career, I decided I had put off law school long enough, and I wanted to fulfill that goal that I've dreamed about for a long time. So I took the LSAT exam, the law school entrance exam, and through the application process, I received a solicitation to apply to a school in Jacksonville, Florida, Florida Coastal School of Law. And I really didn't expect much to materialize out of that, but I submitted the application, and a few weeks later, I was surprised to receive a letter in the mail that I was being offered a scholarship to go there. So,
well, that's really remarkable. A full scholarship at any law school is very valuable, obviously. But I think you spent some time out west too, didn't you? Out in Wyoming for a while?
I did. I spent some time in Wyoming, and that is where I worked at the correctional facility, and I loved it. I'm so glad I had that opportunity to see how a program, it was a work release program to help transition inmates back into the community, and that was valuable. It helped shape me to realize what are the goals of rehabilitation and helping people to become productive in society.
So these were people being held in a prison?
Some of the folks who came into that program were held in a prison, others were at the local county jail, and they were brought to this program so they can begin working, in the community, and while still under a house arrest program, but we supervised them.
Okay, so your husband Ray was a chief of police out in Colorado for a while.
Yes.
And then you two of you moved back to North Carolina?
No, actually, I didn't meet Ray until after
that.
when I went to North Carolina.
Okay.
Yes.
Let's talk about law school. Did you have some kids then?
I had my older daughter. She was 3 years old when I started. Thank goodness, she was such a good little girl. It was easy with her to get the homework done, and
So you made Ray work pretty hard then, I guess, didn't you?
I did. I couldn't have done it without him. It was a team effort, certainly. And you probably remember, Judge, it's a lot of homework going through law school and trying to maintain a family and take care of a toddler and being married and all the responsibilities of house and career. But again, it was worth it. I would encourage anyone who has a dream, don't be discouraged. Enjoy the journey.
Oh, that's great. So you had one daughter while you were in law school, and then you had one later on.
I did.
Well, I'm going to get there eventually, but let's talk about when you came to Florida and what you did when you got here.
When I came to Florida, I settled in Jacksonville to begin law school.
Coastal's there.
Florida Coastal School of Law is in Jacksonville. My husband was finishing up his career in Colorado as chief of police. So the first year that I was here with the 3-year-old, and it was just the two of us in an apartment and going to school, working, just trying to keep up. And I was so thankful when the first year was up and my husband sold our home in Colorado and was able to come and join me. That was...
Well, that's really remarkable. So when you get to Florida, you graduate from law school, where do you go to work?
I received an offer to come to the 12th Judicial Circuit here in the Sarasota-Bradenton area to work as a law clerk.
Tell our viewers what a law clerk does.
Law clerks, they assist the judges sitting on the bench. They research issues, they help with drafting memoranda, orders, proposals, and so we're really there to serve our judiciary branch. Any questions that they have, research. I also had the opportunity to work in the criminal division where we researched what's called a 3850 complaint. So for inmates in our state prisons, if they want to challenge something that occurred in their case or something related to their sentence, they can write to the courts, file a motion in their case, and those will be reviewed, and I help with that function.
And I can say that there is a great deal of enthusiasm when they get to prison to look back and see things they think were wrong. So there's a flood of those coming in. Actually, basically everybody gets convicted, goes to prison, sends in one of those motions.
Yes.
And that was part of your job, to review that and, if necessary, set hearings.
Yes.
Again, we talked about your professor in college that was helping you with writing. So that's an example of an influence that you had that helped you later in your career.
Absolutely.
And you wouldn't have been able to see that at the time. You didn't know that at some point you'd be a law clerk and having to write. And then, of course, law school, it's a very valuable skill to have, to be literate and be able to write.
Absolutely. There were so many things that helped me along the way. Even the just time in the working at waitressing, working with the public, providing customer service. Everything that you do, I think it develops you as a person and it prepares you for something later down the road.
Okay, so you worked for a while with us as a clerk for the court, law clerk, basically doing research and helping to write draft orders for the judges and memorandas, that sort of thing. Yes. And then when did you leave, or why did you leave?
Well, I left in 2008, and I decided I needed to get some trial experience. I was so thankful. I used to joke, and I said, I think everybody should have to do a tour of duty before graduating from law school, or as immediately thereafter, do a tour of duty working as a clerk with judges. So that way, it's an excellent training to learn to know what is a judge looking for when a case comes before him. What does the law say? I think if you can learn to look at a case the way a judge is going to see it and be aware of your audience and also be aware of what jurors are looking at, it makes you a much better lawyer. And after doing roughly almost 2 years in the court counsel office, researching, writing, I felt I had a good basis and the skills, and I was just anxious to get out into the courtroom and start trying cases.
So where'd you go?
I went to the public defender's office.
Well, let's talk about caseloads. What was your first caseload like?
First day on the job at the public defender's office, I was told I had a caseload of roughly 287 files sitting in the office, and I would need to get acquainted with that relatively quickly because I had court in an hour and I needed to get down to the jail to get ready for first appearances.
And what kind of cases typically did you handle as a public defender?
At that point in time, I was doing misdemeanor cases.
Now, the interesting thing is, as a county judge, you have jurisdiction over misdemeanors, right?
I do.
So you've had an experience, see that up close and personal on with clients and the problems that they have.
Absolutely. I think it has been so invaluable to me starting this position on the bench to know what it takes to represent another human being. Somebody's putting their life in your hands, and it's a huge responsibility.
And examples of misdemeanors are DUI cases, domestic battery cases, misdemeanor drug offenses, that sort of thing. So, and there's a lot of those, so as your docket reflects. So how long did you stay with the public defender at that time?
I stayed with him just coming up on 2 years.
And then?
And then a little more government work. I moved on to the Department of Business and Professional Regulation to work on some of the issues that we've seen during the housing crisis with the foreclosures.
Now that's a state agency, sometimes referred to as DPR.
Yes.
And they regulate licenses for a lot of professions.
Yes.
And where did you focus?
I was assigned to the Division of Real Estate, and what I was responsible for reviewing is complaints against property appraisers and real estate agents for violating professional rules that could affect their licensing.
Do you recall any particular types of cases that you would review that were troubling, that needed to have intervention from the government?
We did. Certainly if there were any type of allegations where our citizens, their money was at issue, if money is being held in escrow and there's allegations of fraud or theft, we would need a quick emergency suspension on that practitioner's license to prevent harm to the public. So we took all of that seriously.
And where'd you go after the Department of Professional Regulation?
I decided to try my hand at private practice. And while in private practice, I focused on, again, criminal defense because it was a familiarity for me, and also I learned family law.
Okay. And then that was fairly short, a couple of years?
I did that from 2010 to 2014.
And then you went where?
And then Mr. Eager was the official for the Public Defender's Office. Larry Eager, and he still is there. And he invited me back to work as a division chief in the felony department.
And as a result of that, what types of cases did you handle?
I was responsible for the punishable by life offenses and first-degree felonies that came through what's called Division 2.
Okay, so you're talking, could be murder one.
It could
be not the death penalties necessarily, but the murder ones, sexual battery cases.
Yes.
And these were very high-profile, high-conflict cases for everybody. So then, how'd you get the bug about being a judge?
Well, it really was a whole community effort. Just different people would plant the seed in my head. Hey, you should apply.
You applied more than once, didn't you?
I did. I applied more than once. I actually applied 6 times, and it's actually a 2-step process. At the local level, we have a local committee called the Judicial Nominating Committee. A lot of people refer to it as the JNC. Whenever there's a vacancy, either a judge retires midterm or for any other reason, if there's a vacancy, the governor can appoint that position. And the governor instructs the JNC committee to convene and start accepting applications. The JNC committee will interview folks. After reviewing those applications, they choose people to interview. And after the first round of interviews, they normally will pick up 3-4 folks to send up to Tallahassee for an interview at the governor's office.
Okay. Boy, one thing I got to say, you're persistent. That's a good quality for lawyers and judges, I think. So you get to be a judge. Have you been to the judge school yet?
I have been to what's called Phase 1, and I did that the second week of January. So I had 2 weeks on the bench, and then I went to the Phase 1 and learned about ethics and some of the most important issues that judges should focus on, just to make sure they're there doing the job properly.
I think, I remember when I took my judges school, I learned more
out in the hallway talking to the judges sometimes than you did actually in the classroom. And you get to meet the people that you'll see for the rest of your career and network. That's very important to have those connections. Well, I just need to tell you that with your addition to the bench, we have 31 judges in our circuit. We now have 15 female judges, women judges. So that's really quite a change, and a positive one, I might add. I'm not just saying that because you're here. All right. Well, folks, in closing, Judge Moss's story reminds us that judges are not above the people, they are of the people. She worked her way through her school years, picking produce in the fields of Pennsylvania. She later worked as a waitress through college, was a police officer on patrol, later in corrections. Along the way, she gathered scholarships, made the honor roll, and also a devoted husband who's a police officer now, I think, still in Manatee County. And she helped watch, her husband helped watch the young kids while she was in law school, so she had help that way. And so when folks come into her courtroom, they should know that she's had many of the same life experiences and struggles they've had. Dana is not a trust fund baby. She worked hard to get where she is, and her story should be especially inspiring for young women in our audience. I know I speak for her fellow judges and lawyers who have worked with her professionally. Sarasota County is very fortunate to have Dana Moss on the bench. Thank you folks for watching.
For more than 36 years, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County has worked one-on-one with estate planning attorneys and their clients to make a lasting impact through philanthropy. Stable, trusted, and knowledgeable, the Community Foundation safeguards the charitable legacies of donors to ensure that they continue for years to come. Visit www.cfsarasota.org or call 955-3000 for more information.